Episode 107 of the podcast. What is desensitization? We've heard it a lot. It's kind of a buzzword. It gets tossed around an awful lot, but what is it? And what is it not? What's the difference between sensitization and desensitization? We'll find out this week. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. What is the difference between desensitization and sensitization? This one's a really interesting topic, and this is really common for people to get this one wrong. So I think we talk a lot about desensitizing dogs to grooming processes, to veterinary processes. However, without really knowing what desensitizing is, we can be easily led astray. What I think a lot of people are doing is they're thinking, well, he needs to be desensitized to it through repetition. Now, repetition is how we learn. And I think we can all agree with that. Like, yep, repetition, repetition, repetition. That's how you learn. That's really how you learn anything. You do it a bunch of times. You do it over and over again. Once in a while, there's something that you can learn in a single event learning. And those are usually fear involved or awesome, like totally awesome involved. But not the normal day-to-day how to learn stuff. That's through repetition. That's doing a C major chord on my ukulele over and over and over again until my fingers find it without me thinking. That's holding your shears so that you're not thinking about how to scissor while you're thinking what you're going to scissor. Repetition, 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 and practice. However, desensitization is the process of making less sensitive. So when we want a dog to be less sensitive to something, it's not just about the repetition, it's about the mood. The mood is the key between desensitization and sensitization. Because repetition, repetition, repetition of something you hate and you're afraid of makes you more afraid, more aware of something scary or dangerous or frustrating or uncomfortable. Even more aware of it, wanting to avoid it even more. And that's what I often see happening when people think that they are desensitizing. All right, now that might be, as an example, a groomer says, you know what, you really need to work with him on those feet because he's not real good for his feet. But without giving an owner more to go on, what do owners do? They go home and they're like, boy, he's not good with those feet. We need to work on that. Nope, give me your foot. Give me your foot. Give me your foot. No, don't do that. No, Sparky, no. Right? Now it's become, I'm touching your foot and I'm going to touch your darned foot, whether you like it or not, because you have to let people do this. Right? And the dog is becoming more sensitive about it. Like, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. Or the owner goes home and says, well, we've got to start touching your feet and I want you to like it and I want you to be good for it. And as soon as puppy yelps, they let go. Okay. See, you can trust me. I'm not going to go any further than what you're comfortable with, which also isn't good for grooming. That is not helpful. That is not what we want. Like, oh, he yelped. Oh, never mind then. Like we need to help owners understand and other professionals understand that desensitization isn't just about getting them used to having this area handled or this tool near them or whatever the problem that we're trying to work on. It's not just repetition. It's repetition with a mindfulness of being comfortable with it, accepting, to be understanding that, I'm supposed to hold still while you do that. Or I'm supposed to act in a certain way while you do that. Because it's not always going to be still. For grooming and veterinary purposes, it is very likely to be still that we want. But I want you to think that there are lots of different ways that desensitization and sensitization work. And it's not that one is good and one is bad. So I don't want people to think, well, desensitization is the good one. Well, it's usually what we want, but sometimes sensitization is exactly what we want too. I just want you to be aware that the repetition with the correct mood is what's important. So let me give you a couple of examples, and you can tell me if you think they're sensitization or desensitization, if the dog is more sensitive or less sensitive. So what about when a dog becomes really alert when they hear a cheese wrapper? Right? That's not something we've really taught. We don't teach dogs to love the sound of a cheese wrapper, yet many, many dogs know the sound of a cheese wrapper. So what does that mean when they're suddenly very alert to it? Like, whoop, cheese wrapper? You know, they come in from the bedroom, they're like, I heard a cheese wrapper out here in the kitchen, right? We have taught them to be sensitive to, we have sensitized them to the sound of a cheese wrapper. Now, that's not good or bad. It's just a different context that I want you to think about. Like, they're very alert to it. They're like, cheese wrapper. Heard that, right? What about the dog that's suddenly very alert when we turn on a clipper? Ah, well, wait a minute. Suddenly alert means sensitized. Suddenly alert, right? Now, that could be the dog who's like, oh, okay, I know this one. We're supposed to hold still and we're supposed to be good. And maybe they're very, very intense because they've done a lot of positive reinforcement around this. Like, okay, I'm going to be really, really good and I'm going to hold still. When does the cookie happen? All right, this is going to be great. I personally don't like training with that kind of intensity only because, well, okay, that kind of intensity with grooming processes. I don't want them to think like, I can't wait to jump up and down and go crazy and be happy. I want them to be more chill than that. Right? Because the dog that instantly flinches when they think they hear someone say good job and they're ready to like bounce off the table, that's not real safe. I don't want them to be constantly thinking like, when's the cookie happening? When's the cookie happening? Like that's a little bit frantic, right? I want that in other contexts, but not during grooming, not during a vet visit, right? Not during maybe medication at home. You know, because this isn't just about grooming and this isn't just about groomers or just about vet visits. This is also an owner who has to, you know, check an ear. Like, dude, why are you scratching at your ear? Come on over here. Let me take a look. Like, we don't want that dog to be frantically crazy, happy, sensitized. We want them to be desensitized, less sensitive to it, more casual, controlled, and calm, comfortable, and cooperative, right? We want them to be like, oh, okay, you're going to touch my ear. All right, I've been scratching at it a lot, you know, and to trust us even if it's going to hurt, even if it's going to hurt, even if they don't want it, even if it's uncomfortable. And that's where some of our training fails us because we do these repetitions and sometimes people are like, oh, it's all about teaching them to trust us. And that's true. But if the goal is to do things that they don't want us to do, or things that they might be sensitive about, or that they might be sore about, then we also need them to trust us when it's uncomfortable. And the way to practice that is to think about like, okay, this is calm, and I'm going to touch your ear. Are you calm? Good. Now we can proceed. And to be calm, to collect yourself, to be in charge and confident and make them feel reassured. And I know for some of us, that comes on as new agey babble to make them feel reassured. But I'm going to say there was a time in my life where I would have said, oh my God, really, really? Oh, let's let him be reassured, like puppy mama, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is that reassurance is a really important tool. Yeah, if I can calm a dog down and help reassure them, they're like, hey, this is just me checking something sore. This is gonna hurt a little bit. You with me? You okay? That's reassurance. It's also good training, right? I mean, my own dogs will trust me if something hurts. And you know what? If something hurts, I'm going to handle it a little differently. I'm going to be like, okay, well, let's calm down. Let's go someplace quiet where your brother's not coming over with a squeaky toy and bonking you in the head with it, because that's a little distracting when someone has a boo-boo. Tech talk, a boo-boo. But I want you to think about that desensitization is to be calmer about it, to be less alert to it, to be like, that doesn't really bother me anymore. And it's through repetition. Now, here's another example. A dog who is suddenly like, what? I heard that. What is that? When a doorbell rings. Is that sensitization or desensitization? Yeah, that's sensitization, even though it was repetition. Yep. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Maybe the doorbell rings constantly and the dog's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. You know? I want you to think that it's not just how many times we do it, it's how we do it and the outcome that we're looking for and what we are actively trying to encourage. In a previous episode, I talked about goal setting, right? Be thinking about what is it we ultimately want this dog to do when they hear the dryer turn on, or when they see the grooming table, or when I reach my arms around him to lift him up into the tub, which that's another whole big process. Is it the lifting? Is it the reaching around them? Is it the being in the tub? What part of that are we desensitizing? So goals are really important, but also knowing that sensitization and desensitization are learned through repetition. And we have to be very, very mindful of the mood that we set during that repetition. Because one is calming and the other is excitable. And excitable could be aggressive, or excitable could just be overly silly, but excitable versus calm and trusting and letting us do weird stuff and things. Because remember, grooming and vet visits and medications and bandaging and things like that, all these little medical things we do, that's really weird for dogs, right? We have to teach them to just, you know what, just go with the flow, man. Yeah, we're going to do weird stuff. Go with the flow. Everything's fine. And that's through repetition. And repetition could be either sensitization or desensitization. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes, and tell all of your friends. Another part of desensitization that I think a lot of us get wrong, I'm going to say us because I was not born knowing this, but a lot of us get it wrong, owners and professionals alike, is this idea that desensitization requires treats. And it does not. Or desensitization is positive reinforcement. And that is not true. I would consider desensitization more of classical conditioning than operant conditioning. I know. Now we're getting into some tech talk, but that's okay. Follow along. So operant conditioning is when the dog's behavior has a consequence, like a reward or a punishment. That's operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is when we're just putting things to the dog and seeing the dog's responses to it. And I want you to think about that. Like, they're kind of different. Positive reinforcement is part of operant conditioning. It's based on the dog's behavior. It's a response to a dog's behavior that we're either trying to increase or decrease that behavior. Classical conditioning is when we're trying to pair something to something good or something bad. Maybe we want to pair it to something bad, but we're trying to pair something in such a way that the dog's feelings about it change. Now, I'm usually thinking about classical conditioning in terms of pairing with something good to help a dog feel comfortable with it. But I'll give you another example of where classical conditioning might be paired with something bad, which is, I know sometimes people use things in rattlesnake avoidance, and luckily I don't live any place with rattlesnakes, so maybe I would have a firm opinion about that kind of strategy if I lived someplace with a deadly creature. But they start to pair rattlesnake scent, snakes in general, with something unpleasant. So the dog is like, okay, I don't want to be anywhere near that. That's classical conditioning. Pairing it with something unpleasant. Maybe it's something that the dog doesn't have any previous history with, but now it's being paired with something unpleasant. Or it's being paired with something pleasant, right? It's a simple pairing, trying to improve a mood, trying to affect a mood, trying to help the dog either like something or dislike something. And that's classical conditioning. The dog isn't really being asked to do anything. We're not trying to tell them how well they did. we're trying to affect their mood. So that's a little bit more of what desensitization and sensitization are classical conditioning. So anytime someone starts telling me, well, positive reinforcement and desensitization, it kind of means that they're doing two things at the same time, which is great. Or they don't really understand that positive reinforcement is I am responding to that dog's behavior by adding something in the hopes of increasing that behavior. Because positive reinforcement, the positive part is something added. Reinforcement means the behavior increases. So you're kind of making a bet, testing a theory, that by adding this, that behavior will increase. Okay, desensitization and sensitization are a little bit more about classical conditioning, simply pairing things together in hopes that the dog's mood will change, the dog's outlook will change, the dog's idea of if they're comfortable or uncomfortable with something will change. And like I said, usually we're thinking in terms of making them more comfortable with something, right? We want them to be more comfortable with the sound of the dryer or, being up on a table. Because for a lot of dogs, that one's really tricky. Being up on a table, they're like, oh my God, I could fall. Usually it's like a golden that's up on the table and they start to grip with their toes and then they're skidding around on toenails and they're shaking, they're trying to jump down, which, by the way, if that's the type of problem you're having, think about comfort, right? We're always talking about calm, comfortable, and cooperative. Think about comfort. Often that behavior can be changed by putting down a paw mat or a yoga mat or something that when the dog clenches their feet and tries to grip, has something to grip and now isn't skidding around on toenails. Anyway, not to get off topic, but we want to think about desensitization as pairing of this thing and everything's cool, everything's fine, and lots of repetitions. Everything's cool, everything's fine, you're okay. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of human examples because often when we start talking about desensitization, we already have a fear in place, right? Usually we aren't worrying about desensitization when we're simply introducing something new because now we're just introducing some new thing. So usually desensitization is a process that we choose when there's already a fear. Because otherwise, there's no reason for a dog to be worried about a pair of nail clippers. Right? It's an inanimate object. They have no opinion about it yet until it's been used on them. And so that's why if they have an opinion about nail clippers where they're like, run, that's when we might use something like desensitization because the problem is already there. And now we're like, oh, buddy, I just need you to feel comfortable with these nail clippers out. And that might be our first step, right? We don't necessarily go directly to the nail trim. If they're already showing us, I'm no longer calm with this, I'm no longer comfortable with this is causing me some stress, then that's where we work. Because if you're doing it right, it's about as interesting as watching paint dry. We want them to be calm. So a human example. If a child is afraid of bees, right? It's a pretty common one. Little kids afraid of bees, right? We don't bring them to the hive. Well, let's walk you up to the hive. See, look at all the bees. Stop it. Be good. Because what's going to happen? They're scared. They're going to get more and more scared. The closer they get to the hive, they're going to start jumping around and squealing and being scared. Probably get hurt because they're going to get stung that way, right? So if we continue to push and tell the dog, no, stop it, and just keep pushing and just keep putting that clipper near his eye or whatever it is, we are far more likely to have them jump around, squeal, and get nicked and get hurt or twist themselves in such a way that they do a soft tissue injury on their leg or, hurt their neck, or there are lots of ways to get hurt. That's not desensitization, no matter how many repetitions you do. That will not desensitize, right? So that's where I hear a lot of people making the mistake, like, well, you know what, he's got to get used to it. And I've actually heard plenty of people over the years calling that desensitization. We're going to desensitize him to this, but they've basically brought that child to the hive to observe bees up close, and we don't do that, right? We don't need to. So if you're just repeating and repeating and repeating while the dog is scared, you are very likely to make it far more scary, far more anxious, far more stressful. And instead, if we calm everything down and think back to when was this dog comfortable, at what point was this dog comfortable, and how can we build on that? How can we build on that? Through repetition, for them to be like, oh, yeah, I'm comfortable with that too. Oh, I'm comfortable with that too. And you need a target goal. Calm, comfortable, and cooperative works for many, many, many people. Now, that's not a very specific goal, but if there's something in particular, let's see, here's a good example. A little dog that I groom who has some leg problems going on. I don't care if he stands while I do his nails. I have to have him stand for part of drying. I have to have him stand for part of scissoring and clippering. But for his nails, I can do it while he's sitting. So all I really care about is him being comfortable with it. And he is. But I'll check and I'll move around him and like, okay, you ready? Yeah, okay. Because I know it does cause him discomfort. His legs just weren't put on his body right. We all know those dogs, right? The little like Lhasas that one leg looks like it was put on sideways, right? They're never going to feel physically comfortable with those legs, right? Those legs are probably a cause of soreness for their entire life, right? If we're going to wait for them to be physically comfortable and 100% comfortable, that's going to take some pain meds or something. What we need to do is teach them, all right, I'm willing to meet you partway. And I want you to be calm for it. I want you to be comfortable with it. I don't want you to be afraid, right? And that's where desensitization comes in. Let's just relax and do lots of repetitions of the stuff you can handle at the point that you can handle, and slowly build on that. Slowly, gently build on what you can handle, how well you handle it, until eventually an owner says, boy, I really didn't think that you were going to be able to get his nails done, but he didn't seem to care at all. And it happens. It happens to me all the time. Owners are like, oh, he didn't scream or anything. Like, well, I'm not going to try to get him to scream. I'm trying to avoid any of that. But they're often surprised. Like, I didn't think he'd be that good. But it's all about desensitizing, helping him be comfortable with it, helping him at the point where he is comfortable and building on that so that we can have a dog who eventually isn't worried about it, which is different than a dog who stands still despite how scary it is. That's another whole topic. But sometimes I think we just don't really understand what we're asking. And when owners go home and try it, they're just like, oh, I got to just be touching your feet. Right? And that's why sometimes owners come back and the problem becomes worse. The dog's like, don't you even get near my feet. I've been having this argument with my family for like weeks now. I don't want anyone near my feet. So desensitization and sensitization are all about the mood. So if you get nothing else out of that, just think, well, am I encouraging this dog to be less sensitive about something or more sensitive about something? If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group, Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.